Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Pradeep Gokhale from Central University of Tibetan Studies at Sarnath. Now the module that I am going to present has been written by Dr. Kuntala Bhattacharya from Ravindra Bharati University, Calcutta. At present, we are dealing with fallacies discussed by Dinnaga. In the previous module, we discussed Pakshabhasas and Drushtanta-bhasas as discussed by Dinnaga. And we have seen that since, according to Dinnaga, there are three elements in Pararthanumana, namely Paksha, Hetu and Drishtanta. Corresponding to the three elements, there are three kinds of fallacies are possible, namely Pakshabhasa, Hetvabhasa and Drishtanta-bhasa. So out of them, we have discussed Pakshabhasa and Drishtanta-bhasa, and now we are going to discuss Hetvabhasa. Now, what is the meaning of the term Hetvabhasa? The term Hetvabhasa is derived in two different ways. One is Abhasa, means Abhasante iti Abhasaha, which means fault, dosha, and then Hetoho Abhasaha, Hetvabhasaha. So Hetvabhasa is the fault of a proposed probans, that is Hetu dosha. According to the second derivation, Hetvabhasa means Hetuvat Abhasante ye te Hetvabhasa. Hetvabhasa is an apparent or seeming probans, that is a faulty probans, Dushta Hetu. Dinnaga uses the term Hetvabhasa in the second sense, that is Hetuvat Abhasate iti Hetvabhasa, which appears as Hetu but actually is not proper Hetu. Now, there are three kinds of faulty probans according to Dinnaga, namely Asiddha, Anaikantika and Viruddha. We have seen that Hetu, in order to be a good Hetu or sound probans, has to fulfill three conditions: existence in the subject, existence in similar cases, at least in a part of a similar cases or a few similar cases, and non-existence in dissimilar cases. So these violation, because through violation of some of these conditions, Hetu becomes faulty or defective or fallacious. Now there is a kind of correlation between the three conditions and three fallacies, though it is not exactly one-to-one correlation. Asiddha fallacy occurs due to non-fulfillment of the first condition, that is existence in Paksha. Viruddha occurs by violation of both the conditions, that is second condition and third condition together. That is, Hetu should exist at least in a part of Sapaksha. This condition is also violated because Viruddha Hetu does not exist in Sapaksha at all. And a non-existence in Vipaksha, this condition is also violated because Viruddha Hetu exists in Vipaksha. And lastly, Anaikantika occurs by violation of one of the two conditions, that is second condition or third condition. Either Anaikantika Hetu exists in both Sapaksha as well as Vipaksha, that is, it should not exist in Vipaksha, but it exists in Vipaksha, so third condition is violated. Or Anaikantika Hetvabhasa can occur if Hetu exists neither in Sapaksha nor in Vipaksha. Now, in that case, Hetu actually should not exist in Vipaksha and it does not exist in Vipaksha, but it should exist in Sapaksha, at least in a part of Sapaksha, but it does not exist in Sapaksha at all. So, in this way, second condition is violated. So, either by violation of second condition or third condition, we get Anaikantika Hetvabhasa. So, now let us consider the three Hetvabhasas one after the other. So, first we will consider Asiddha Hetvabhasa, that is the unproved faulty probans. Asiddha means na siddha, siddha which is not proved or not known. Therefore, a probans which is unproved or unknown is asiddha. Since this fallacy is supposed to arise due to non-fulfillment of the condition that the probans should exist in the subject, unproved or unknown probans is the probans which is unproved or unknown as existent in the subject. Now, this asiddha is of four kinds according to Dinnaga: ubhaya siddha, anyatara siddha, sandigdha siddha, and ashraya siddha. Now, ubhaya siddha and anyatara siddha, they are concerned with the two parties, that is Vadin and Prativadin, or disputant and opponent. So, if it is asiddha for ubhaya, means both the parties, then it is ubhaya asiddha. If hetu is asiddha for one of the two parties, then it is anyatara siddha. Now, let us come to ubhaya siddha. The probans which is accepted as unproved by both the contending theorists, namely the defender and the opponent, Vadin and Prativadin, then it will be called ubhaya siddha. The example is sound is non-eternal because it is visible. Shabdaha anityaha chakshushatvat. Now, visibility, that sound is visible, is not acceptable to any party, and therefore this inference will be fallacious, or this hetu will be fallacious as ubhaya siddha, not acceptable to both the parties. The next one is we have anyatara siddha. The probans is anyatara siddha, not acceptable to one of the parties, if it is not acceptable to be present in the subject by one of the contending theories, that is either by Vadin or by Prativadin. Now, let us consider the example: sound is non-eternal because it is created. Now, in this inference, sound is subject, non-eternality is the probandum, and createdness is probans. Now, here the contending theorists are Vaisheshikas, that is, and others who maintain that sound is created, and Sankhyas, Bhattamimausakas, and the like, who maintain that sound is manifested and it is not created. So, according to the latter, who believe that sound is eternal, the probans createdness is not present in the subject at all, and it is therefore unproved. So, one of the parties does not accept. So, either if Vaisheshika is arguing, then Bhattamimausakas will say that this probans does not exist according to us in the subject, or on the other hand, if Bhattamimausakas themselves are arguing, then Vaisheshikas will point out that you see, you yourself do not accept that sound is created. So, in this way, one of the parties does not accept that sound is created, and therefore createdness does not exist in paksha, namely sound. So, here it should be noted that this particular fallacy is could be actually a sound probans, which is thought to be unsound only when its presence in the subject is not known. A probans is unproved as long as it is not proved as sound to the contending theories. Now, third type of asiddha is sandigdha asiddha. Now, the example is the hill has fire because it has smoke, when the inference is made by seeing something which resembles smoke, about which there may be a doubt of the form: is it smoke or steam or a collection of minute earth particles, that is, it is just a dust. So, when there is a doubt about the nature of the probans, then it will be sandigdha siddha. And then fourth one is ashraya siddha. Ashraya means substratum or locus. So, when the locus of the probans is asiddha, unproved, non-existent, then it will be a case of ashraya siddha. For example, space is a substance because it is the locus of qualities. Suppose a Vaisheshika makes this kind of inference, then a Buddhist would say that in this inference, space is the subject which according to you is existent. But according to us, space is non-existent. There is Buddhists other than Vaibhashikas would say that space is non-existent according to us. It is only conventionally real and not ultimately real. So here the ashraya, that is the substratum, is asiddha, locus is asiddha, and therefore the question of hetu being there in the locus does not exist. So these are the basic four fallacies, varieties of asiddha. But later on we find that commentators add to this list. For example, Haribhadra Suri in his commentary on Nyaya Pravesha mentions two more unproved probans, namely Pratijñarthaika Desha Siddha. This is one variety which he introduces, and the other is Avyapaka Siddha. So Pratijñarthaika Desha Asiddha occurs if probans is not present in a part of the thesis that is to be demonstrated. Now suppose somebody argues sound is non-eternal because it has non-eternality. That is Shabdaha Anityaha Anityatva. So Anityatva, which is regarded as some kind of Samanya or Jati, which exists in sound and which is the probans here. Now the question will arise that a part of the thesis, namely non-eternality, is not acceptable to those for whom sound is manifested and not created. Similarly, for the Buddhists, non-eternality is unacceptable as a common characteristic or jati called non-eternality. Hence, the probans would not be present in a part of the thesis to be demonstrated, and it is therefore unproved. Then the sixth variety, which is introduced by Haribhadra Suri, is Avyapaka Siddha. A probans is Avyapaka Siddha if it is present in a part of the inferential subject, not in the whole of the inferential subject. So, for example, somebody argues, that, of course it is the non-Buddhist who is arguing, that trees are conscious, conscious beings, because they sleep at night. Taravaha sachetanaha swapat. Now here the probans, the property of sleeping at night is understood as folding their leaves as if sleeping. So there is a variety of plants in which case we can say that at night their leaves get folded, and that is as good as sleeping. And on the basis of this, the opponent of the Buddhist is arguing that since plants sleep at night, therefore they must be conscious. But the problem with this inference is that only a few plants, even if you interpret folding the leaves as sleeping, you can say that only a few plants actually sleep, not all the plants, and therefore here hetu will exist only in part of paksha and not in the whole of paksha. So according to Haribhadra, the additional types, namely 5 and 6, can be included in Ubhaya Siddha and hence are not separately mentioned by Dinnaga. So Haribhadra tries to include them under Ubhaya Siddha. Now we come to the second major fallacy, that is Anaikantika Hetvabhasa. That is irregular or inconclusive faulty probans. The term Anaikantika comes from Ekanta, which means regularity or conclusiveness. And Anaikantika here stands for a probans which is characterized by irregularity in its relation to the probandum, and therefore does not prove the probandum conclusively. Now, according to the triple character of a sound probans, the probans should exist in at least a few cases of sapaksha, and it should not exist in vipaksha at all. Now, the fallacy of irregular or inconclusive probans generally occurs by violating these conditions in different ways. Dinnaga mentions 6 kinds of Anaikantika Hetvabhasa, which out of these 6 kinds we can say that 5 are included in the Hetu Chakra that we have discussed in the previous module. one is sadharana, then asadharana, then sapakshayika desha vritti vipaksha vyapi, vipakshaika desha vritti sapaksha vyapi, ubhaya pakshayika desha vritti, and lastly viruddha vyabhichari. Now out of them we can say that actually what we call, while discussing Hetu Chakra, we only mentioned Sadharana and Asadharana. And by Sadharana we mean the Hetu which exists in both Sapaksha and Vipaksha. But Hetu exists in both Sapaksha and Vipaksha. This is possible in different ways. For example, Hetu may exist in the whole of Sapaksha and whole of Vipaksha, or part of Sapaksha but whole of Vipaksha, or part of the Vipaksha and whole of Sapaksha, or part of Sapaksha and part of Vipaksha. So these four possibilities are here uh, uh, described in different way. That is, Sadharana here means whole of Sapaksha. If Hetu exists in whole of Sapaksha and whole of Vipaksha, then it is called Sadharana. If it exists in part of Sapaksha but whole of Vipaksha, then it will be called Sapaksha Ekadesha Vritti Vipaksha Vyapi. If it exists in part of Vipaksha and the whole of Sapaksha, then it will be called Vipaksha Ekadesha Vritti Sapaksha Vyapi. If it exists in part of Sapaksha and part of Vipaksha, then it will be called Ubhaya Paksha Ekadesha Vritti. So this is how the same classification is split into different varieties. And last variety, namely Viruddha Vyabhichari, is altogether of different nature, but that we will discuss later. Now we will consider the examples of these varieties of Anaikantika. Sadharana Anaikantika, the example is sound is eternal because it is knowable. So here knowability is the probance which exists in the whole of Sapaksha and the whole of Vipaksha, that is all the things which are eternal and also all the things which are non-eternal. Knowability as probance is called sadharana, and it is inconclusive because it causes a doubt of the form. Is the sound eternal like space or non-eternal like pot? Then second variety is called asadharana. The example is sound is eternal because it is audible. So here audibility exists only in sound, it does not exist outside sound, and therefore we can say that it exists neither in Sapaksha nor in Vipaksha, and therefore it is uncommon, and therefore it is called asadharana, but at the same time it is inconclusive, and therefore it is called anaikantika. Next one is Sapakshayika desha vritti Vipaksha Vyapi, that is which exists in part of Sapaksha but whole of Vipaksha. The example is sound is not caused immediately after conscious effort because it is non-eternal. So here non-eternality exists in part of Sapaksha, that is the things which are not caused immediately after conscious effort. Now such things, for example, are like Akasha and lightning. So out of Akasha and lightning, non-eternality exists in Akasha, but it does not exist in lightning. So in this sense, it exists in part of Sapaksha, but it exists in the whole of Vipaksha, that is things which are not caused immediately after conscious effort. Non-eternality exists, they will form Sapaksha, but those which are caused immediately after conscious effort, such things will constitute Vipaksha, and non-eternality exists in all of them, and therefore it is Vipaksha Vyapi. Next example, next variety is Vipakshayika desha vritti Sapaksha Vyapi. That is, if Hetu exists in part of Vipaksha, but the whole of Sapaksha. Now the example is sound is caused immediately after conscious effort because it is non-eternal. Now here subject is sound, the probandum is the property of being caused immediately after conscious effort, and the probans is non-eternality. Now what will be vipaksha here? It will consist of the objects like lightning and space because they are not due to conscious effort, and sapaksha will consist of the objects like pot because they are always due to conscious effort. And now we can ask the question, does hetu exist in vipaksha? If it exists in vipaksha, does it exist in the whole of vipaksha or part of vipaksha? Similarly, does it exist in sapaksha? If it exists in sapaksha, does it exist in part of sapaksha or the whole of sapaksha? So here we can say that this hetu exists in part of vipaksha, that is in lightning, but it is present in all the instances of sapaksha because all things which are caused are non-eternal. So in this way it is vipaksha ekadesha vritti, but sapaksha vyapi. Now next one is ubhaya paksha ekadesha vritti, that is hetu which exists in part of sapaksha and part of vipaksha. The example is sound is eternal because it is not of limited magnitude, that is amurtatvat. Now here we have to, what is hetu? The being of limited magnitude. And what is sadhya? Eternality. So what will be sapaksha? The things which are eternal will be sapaksha, but those eternal things include the things like atom, which are of limited magnitude, and also the things like akasha, which are not of limited magnitude. So hetu exists here in part of sapaksha. Now similarly, what will be vipaksha here? It will be non-eternal things. Now among the non-eternal things, for example, a pot is also a non-eternal thing and it is of limited magnitude. But for example, happiness is also non-eternal, but we cannot say that it is of limited magnitude. Actually, we cannot talk of magnitude of happiness. So this hetu exists in part of vipaksha, not in the whole of vipaksha. So it exists in part of sapaksha and part of vipaksha, and therefore it is ubhaya paksha ekadesha vritti. And here also it is inconclusive because it gives rise to a doubt of the form, is sound being not of limited magnitude eternal like space or non-eternal like happiness? So in this way we can talk of ubhaya paksha ekadesha vritti. Now that we come to the last variety of anaikantika hetvabhasa, namely viruddha vyabhichari. It is of a peculiar nature. Viruddha vyabhichari was introduced by Dinnaga. It is not like other varieties of anaikantika. Here actually we have two inferences and which try to prove the opposite conclusion of each other. That is, there is one inference which tries to prove that sound is non-eternal, and there is another inference which tries to prove that sound is eternal. And the two inferences are, you can say, equally strong, and therefore the situation arises that out of the two hetus, no hetu is conclusive, and therefore the whole argument becomes inconclusive. For example, sound is non-eternal because it is created just as a pot. Now suppose this argument is advanced by Vaisheshikas against the Mimamsakas, and then Mimamsakas in turn argue that no, sound is eternal because it has audibility like soundness. And now if we analyze the two arguments, then we can say that in both these inferences, the hetu fulfills the three conditions, that is existence in paksha, existence in sapaksha, and non-existence in vipaksha. All the three conditions are fulfilled by both the hetus, that is hetu and pratihetu, but these two hetus prove something which is opposed to each other. So the two hetus are viruddha avyabhichari. They are avyabhichari in the sense that they fulfill the three conditions, but at the same time they prove something which is viruddha of each other, and therefore they become inconclusive. Now, here we have to note that the above two probands considered in themselves do not suffer from the above fault. So, if you consider any one hetu separately, then it will not be viruddha vyabhichari. Only when we consider the two hetus together, then they can be called viruddha avyabhichari. They are concomitant with opposite conclusion. So, in that sense, they are viruddha avyabhichari. Now, there is actually a problem about viruddha avyabhichari. That is, if we accept the Dinnaga's framework of inference, then within that framework, we can say that viruddha vyabhichari, this fallacy can occur, because it is possible, in principle it is possible that there can be two hetus which fulfill all the three conditions, and yet they lead to conclusions which contradict with each other. But if we consider avyabhichari in a different sense, that is not in the sense of fulfilling all the three conditions, but if we say that it is fulfilling the condition of necessary relation or universal relation, then there will be a problem. And actually, we will see that Dharmakirti criticized this particular fallacy which was mentioned by Dinnaga, because according to Dharmakirti, avyabhichara does not mean just fulfilling these conditions as empirical conditions, existence in paksha, existence in sapaksha, and existence in non-existence in vipaksha. But for him, avyabhichara means a kind of necessary relation, a universal relation between probans and probandum. And then if we accept avyabhichara in that sense, then we can say that viruddha vyabhichari is not possible at all, because if one hetu is necessarily and universally related with the probandum, then there cannot be a counter hetu which is also universally and necessarily related with another probandum which contradicts the earlier probandum. So, this is logically impossible, and therefore, Dharmakirti criticized viruddha vyabhichari as a fallacy. Now, we come to the third major fallacy, namely viruddha hetvabhasa, which is generally translated as contradictory or hostile faulty probans. Of course, it is not exactly contradictory probans, but it is called viruddha because it proves, instead of proving the probandum which is claimed in the argument, it actually proves the opposite of the probandum. It proves the contrary of the probandum. Now, it is again of various kinds. Four kinds are mentioned: dharma swarupa viparita sadhana, dharma vishesha viparita sadhana, dharmi swarupa viparita sadhana, and dharmi vishesha viparita sadhana. So, viparita sadhana is common to all. Viparita sadhana means which proves opposite. So, what is claimed to be proved, actually the probans proves the opposite of what is claimed to be proved. So, in that way it becomes viruddha. But what it proves, opposite of what? So, if it is dharma swarupa, opposite of dharma swarupa, or opposite of dharma vishesha, opposite of dharmi swarupa or dharmi vishesha, accordingly the viruddha fallacy will be different. The first variety of viruddha hetvabhasa is dharma swarupa viparita sadhana. That is, here dharma means sadhya dharma, and this when opposite of the nature of sadhya dharma is actually proved by the proband, then it will be dharma swarupa viparita sadhana. And what is generally cited as the example of viruddha fallacy is actually dharma swarupa viparita sadhana. And we have already considered those types. So, that is sound is eternal because it is created, and sound is eternal because it is due to conscious effort. And then we go to the next type, namely dharma vishesha viparita sadhana. That is here the hetu does not prove the sadhya property which is stated, but the special feature of the sadhya property which is intended, that is actually the opposite of that is proved. For example, Sankhya philosophers give this argument: eyes, etc., are made for something other, since they are composite, just like bed and seat. Here, by this inference, Sankhya philosophers try to prove the existence of Purusha. That is, they want to prove that just as bed and seat are not meant for themselves, but they are meant for something else. That is, they are meant for persons who use them. Similarly, the limbs such as eyes and all that, they are also meant for something other than themselves, and that something other than themselves, according to them, is Purusha. That is how Sankhya philosophers try to argue. But then Buddhists point out that here what the bed and seat are meant for a person, but that person is a composite thing. And similarly, if you are trying to say that eyes, etc., also must be meant for something else, because eyes, etc., are composite things, then what will be proved by this inference also will be a composite thing. But what you intend to prove is a non-composite Purusha, and therefore this inference proves something which is contrary to what you intend to prove. That is, it proves something which is contrary to dharma vishesha, the particular characteristic of dharma which you intend to prove. So, therefore, it is called contradictory or viruddha fallacy. Now, it is also called ishtavighata krut. This particular fallacy is also called ishtavighata krut. Now we go to the third variety, namely dharmi swarupa viparita sadhana. Here the example is, again Nyaya Vaisheshikas are trying to prove that existence, that is satta, is a kind of jati. That is, it is a kind of, it is not something which can be included under dravya or guna or karma, and therefore we have to accept satta as an independent padartha. So, for that they are giving an argument that existence is neither a substance nor a quality nor an action, because it is present in a single substance and because it is present in quality and action. For example, a universal particular. Universal particular means samanya vishesha like ghatatva, patatva, etc. So, these samanya visheshas they exist in a single substance, and also they exist in dravyas, some of them exist in qualities and actions. Similarly, satta also is like that, and therefore satta also should not be included under either substance or quality or action, and therefore it should be accepted as an independent padartha. That is the kind of argument that they are giving, and Buddhists are pointing out that this inference is fallacious because it is dharmi swarupa viparita sadhana. You intend to prove that satta is something which is different from all others, but then we will say that the same thing is applicable to abhava also, because abhava is also not dravya, guna or karma, and therefore we can identify satta with abhava. So, this will be a kind of undesirable consequence that your inference will have. Instead of proving that satta exists as bhava you will be proving that satta exists as abhava, and therefore it is dharmi swarupa viparita sadhana. And coming to the last one, that is dharmi vishesha viparita sadhana. Here we go one step further and we say that now just instead of proving that existence is neither a substance nor a quality, we are also proving that some special feature of this existence. And what is that feature? It is the that sat pratyaya krutva, that is causing the experience of the form exists. So this is the particular feature of existence which is the additional feature which you try to prove. But here again Buddhists are saying that the same argument can also be applied to abhava, just as it is applied to satta, it can be applied to abhava. And abhava is what? It is asat pratyaya krut, that is, it causes the experience of the form does not exist. So this additional feature, which is unintended feature, that feature will be proved by this inference, and therefore it proves something which is contrary to what is intended to be proved, and hence it is called dharmi vishesha viparita sadhana type of fallacious inference. Thank you.